have Dr. Jeff Ripley, who serves as Associate Director for County Programs for our Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service. As we've mentioned before, these video series started as with a group of agents who got together when the coronavirus started, and they wanted to bring education to their people in real time from real experts. And we've been doing that, but through the course of that, it's expanded much further than the group of counties we've started with. And we've really got to engage a lot of folks from across our state, our nation, and Dr. Ripley, even people from across the world, from other nations have been joining us and have been engaging in our conversation and learning a lot from folks just like you who are bringing us top-notch information at a time that we all need it most. So we're excited to get started today. Folks are going to hear a little bit of wind. We're out in the country. We're at a new location, and we're thankful to be there with folks who are hosting us with some really great goats as we talk about selection. So we have a lot of folks joining us already. If you would, and you're watching on Facebook, go ahead and comment where you're watching from. We'd love to hear where you're at. And we'd also like to know your questions. So Dr. Ripley, one thing that makes these so great are people's questions, and we want to hear from them and keep it engaging. So let us know what you're thinking. Let us know what you're curious about on market goat selection. You have the guy right in front of you who's going to be able to answer it the very best that we can. Dr. Ripley is not only a dad who has raised show goats, but also as a judge, a superintendent, and a breeder of market goats. So we are really in for a treat. So Dr. Ripley, without any further ado, let's get started.
Great. Thanks, Dottie. Dottie's right. We have a little wind over here today, but for those of us standing in the goat pen, we're kind of thankful for that wind. It feels pretty good out here. So I'll talk loud and hopefully we can overcome the wind. I'm glad that we're finally getting to the right species, and we're going to talk about goats. We've talked about all those minor species already. We're finally going to talk about the one that matters, right, Dottie? We're going to talk about market goats today. So we're just up the road from College Station. We're outside of Rockdale at Lacopa today, and really appreciate the Jackson family hosting us and allowing us to use their facility and their goats to talk a little about selection today. And we'll jump in and talk about some of the things that we look for. You know, I always tell young families and kids as I do clinics and talk with families that are interested in the GOAT project that, you know, this is a project that you as a family will come to enjoy pretty quickly. Goats are a lot of fun. They're animals that have some personality. They're typically pretty fault-free kind of animals. They don't have a lot of problems. They're pretty clean. They don't make a mess. You know, things in terms of taking care of goats is really not that hard as long as you're paying attention to things. So you'll enjoy the GOAT project. The other thing I tell families is, you know, it costs just as much to feed an average goat as it does to feed a good goat. So why not know a little about selection and get a good one to start with? And that's what we're going to talk about today is some of the things that you need to look for to find a goat that'll work for you. The other thing to consider, and we'll talk about some differences as we go through, but you know, the size and the age of your showman, of your child, should have some impact on what you try to do in terms of selection of a goat. I was notorious as a dad at times of putting a 9-year-old 40-pound kid on a 160-pound sheep or a 115-pound goat, and that probably wasn't the best combination. So think about that, and you know, I'll help you look at some ways that you can determine when these goats are little and just weaned, how big they might be in the end, and some things that you can look at in terms of growth indicators and some indicators of how big they might be 7-8 months from now when we're showing them, or 10 months from now when we're showing them at a major livestock show. So we'll go through some of those kinds of things. I want to get y'all started thinking, and I'm going to ask some questions and ask you a question and ask you to type into the chat box some of the things that you think, what do you think might be the number one thing that you look for in terms of growth potential and how big a goat might get. And we'll come back to that in just a few minutes, but I want y'all to be thinking about that. So selection, we'll talk about structure first and foremost. I always make that priority number one is structure. And by structure, I mean, how is that goat built in terms of his bones, in terms of his skeleton from the ground up? So I like to stand off and watch goats move around the pen. We've got some goats in the pen. I like to watch goats just walk and just kind of study them and see how they move and see how they stop, see how they settle in on their feet and legs as they walk away from you. they move around, do they stay level enough down their top? So from the point of their shoulder out through their tail, do they stay level in terms of the way they move down their top? I think that's really important in these goats. I think watching them when they stop, does their head and neck come out of the top of their shoulders? Are they goats that have some extension and some smoothness through their shoulder and up through their front end when they stop? Do they have that balanced, athletic look? All those kinds of things are things that I determine in my mind when we're looking at young goats before I ever lay my hands on one to look at muscle tone and muscle structure. I like to just watch them walk, how wide-faced they are. You can see whether we've got some muscle in these goats. You can certainly see whether we've got some extension up in their front end, whether we've got some smoothness in their shoulder. Now, you hear judges talk about livestock covering their tracks. And that's any species of livestock, but as they walk, their front foot leaves, does that back foot basically cover the hole that was left by that front foot? So are they taking a long stride? Some of these goats that we see nowadays have got so much muscle that they want to be just a little choppy in terms of the way they walk. You can watch these goats move and see that they take a long, easy stride off their back legs. I think that is really important in terms of goats being functional and being able to move around the ring. So I like to see all that before I ever touch one. So structure is always priority number one for me. The other piece of structure that becomes more important today than it has been sometimes in the past is stoutness and the amount of bone, foot size, the true structural mass of these goats is really important. Whether it's sheep or goats, you hear them talk about hair, you hear them talk about shag. That's not an indicator of bone. That's an indicator that they've got long hair. I want to see one that's got true foot size and true circumference of bone. If they have a little hair, you can balance them up and it makes them look a little better without question. But look for true foot size and look for true bone and just make sure that they're not frail made. Those frail made goats have a difficulty ever putting on quite enough muscle and maintaining the skeletal integrity that we need them to have as they mature. So look for ones that are correct in terms of their structure and that are stout in terms of their foot size and their bone. So structure is number one, okay? Donnie, are we getting any responses to the question?
Dr. Ripley, I know that they're going to have them coming in. We'll keep you in the loop. We already have some great questions coming in, but why don't you just keep it up? We're loving hearing from you. Our wind is a little touch and go, but folks, I just want to remind you to stick with us. We have great information being shared. We're just out on location today, and it's going to be great. So keep those questions coming in. We'll keep you in the loop on Facebook, Dr. Ripley.
Great. Okay. So after structure, I always look for muscle. There's a lot of things that are important, but clearly when we're talking about market animals, if they're built right, they've got the right kind of skeleton, we've got to have some muscle that's laid on top of that skeleton. And I think with most judges today, muscle is maybe not the most critical, but it is certainly in the top 2 or 3 in terms of what they're looking for. So we want goats that have got some muscle. If they're built right in terms of that skeleton, if they've got the right kind of shape to their rib, they've got some turn in their rib, particularly in this upper rib, there's a whole lot better chance that we're going to lay some muscle down that top. So a nice round ribbed kind of a goat that's got some turn in that upper rib will lay a ribeye with that longissimus dorsi muscle will be thicker, will be more expressive as he comes down his top. That's really important. If they've got some base width, as we talked about, you're much more likely to have the kind of hip that we need to see in these goats, from hooks to pins. These hook bones are the beginning of the hip. The pin bones are out on either side of the tail. So you want that hook to pin shape to be like a triangle. When you look over the top, you want it to get wider as it comes back at you. And if you have that coming out their hip, where from the hooks to the pins it gets wider, you're going to have some muscle in that upper hip. And then we're just going to look for shape and try to find goats that have got some muscle shape and some muscle expression. Even young goats that are 2 months old, like these little goats in the pen right here, are going to show you some indicators of muscle. The skinniest goat that you'll see in any pen, if he's going to have muscle, will still have muscle. It's still going to have muscle right here in this forearm. So if you see some bulge in this forearm, you know that this little goat, as skinny as he is going to be one that's going to have some muscle. Okay? So always study that forearm in those goats. Look at base width, look at forearm. This is one that certainly we can see the right kind of rib shape. He's got some turn here. He's shallow in that forerib, so he's got a really round cage in him. And as you have that, because he's round here, we can lay more muscle down that top. He's a goat that certainly we can see some width, some length, and some width in his hip. He's really big-footed and stout in terms of his bone work. In my opinion, this is probably a goat that feeds into a heavier weight class. So he's later maturing than some of the goats that we'll look at. And what you see with these later maturing goats is they'll be a little leggier at times early on in their life. They may not appear to be quite as thick as some of their counterparts that are earlier maturing. That's because they're not where we need them to be yet. The difference in this one is when he's finished, he's going to weigh, probably over 100 pounds or around 100 pounds, maybe a little more. Whereas some of the smaller goats may finish at 80 or 85 pounds. And there's a real difference in terms of the way they're going to feed. The things that you're going to see as you start to compare, and this is one of the questions that I asked you that I want you to notice, is you're going to start to see differences in extension up to their front end. More than anything, this cannon bone, which is from the knee to the ground, will be longer in those goats that are going to be later maturing, that are going to be bigger frame. So to go with that longer cannon bone, we've got more extension in his neck. We've got more length of body than the other little goat that's in the pen, which is just massively thick. As you can see him moving around the ring under the camera. This one has got a tremendous amount of width and thickness as he goes away from you. Certainly you can see the forearm in this goat is just massive with the shape that he's got in his forearm. Okay, but look at him here. Look at this length in this cannon bone from the knee to the ground. He's probably 20% shorter than the bigger paint-fronted goat that's in the pen with him today. This goat won't feed to that end weight that we have in this goat, in the bigger goat. So as you're starting to think about a kid that's 9 or 10 or 11 years old that's pretty short, not like Jacob, who's 6'2", you may need a goat that's going to feed and be just a little smaller. That'll work for you for one of your younger kids and will be the right size for them. This goat's going to be pretty big. You may not want him for that 60-pound or 50-pound third grade girl. You want something maybe like this. So the point is there's really good big goats and there's really good small goats. You just need to know kind of what you've got as you're beginning to look and select these goats. So if you look for structure and you look for muscle, then you can make some decisions and see some differences between the way these goats are going to finish out. The other key is, these goats are going to feed a little different. So if you're going to feed more than one goat, you're going to feed several goats. As you get into the fall, these goats aren't going to be in the same pen. They're not going to be fed together. You may have a couple of small goats that you can feed together. You may have a couple of these later maturing bigger goats that you can feed together, but these two are not going to feed together because what's going to happen is this little goat is going to mature first. He's going to start laying on fat, and this one's still going to look like we need to push him. So we're going to need to feed this one more in the end than we're feeding this one, or we're going to have one goat that's too thin and one goat that's too fat. And you've got to be able to recognize that as feeders. That's a part of your selection process, is knowing which one of these is going to be the goat that you push really hard and you just kind of feed straight through versus one that you're going to have to manage a little bit that may mature a little quicker and require a little different management towards the end of the project. So both really nice in terms of structure. Both of them get around the ring good in terms of their feet and legs. Both of these goats have some balance and some eye appeal, which is critical. That's the third phase of selection that we're going to talk about here in just a second. It is how it all folds in together and balance. But these two goats are not going to feed exactly the same. They're going to end up in different places, and that's okay. There's no problem with having a lighter weight goat at one show and a heavier weight goat at another show. That's perfectly fine. The last time I checked, they still handed out blue ribbons in every class at every show. So it's fine to win a lightweight class or a heavyweight class. Either one works just fine. So structure, muscle. Then kind of the final piece of that is balance. And, you know, that's become probably more important as genetics in these goats have continued to get better and better. When we first started showing market goats, we just tried to find something that had some muscle. You got to remember, when we first started this, we were showing goats that were primarily Spanish and dairy goat crosses. This is before we brought boar goats in. Then we brought boar goats in and we began to put a little bit of muscle in them, but we didn't have a whole lot of balance to go with it. So we could find goats that had some muscle, but it was hard to find goats that had muscle that had enough balance and look. Now that is absolutely critical because there's a lot of them out here that do have all of it. What you're looking for is one that's complete, that's structurally correct, that has some muscle, but that puts it all together in a really balanced package. And I like to study balance in two ways. I like to study them walking around the ring or walking around the pen, those goats that just have that athletic look, that get off in the corner and keep their head up, that when they stop with their feet about where we want them to, that maintain levelness in their skeleton down their top and in their underline. All those things count in terms of balance. They're goats that are smooth in their shoulder, that have some extension up in their front end. They're still wide. They still have that base width. That's critical. But they're smooth in terms of the way their shoulder ties into their neck and into their top line. They're really smooth there. They're really attractive there. As you study them down their top, they don't get easy behind their shoulders. They're goats that don't get up in their loin. They just stay level and give you a good look. They're not dead level at their hip. There's always going to be just a little set to the hip in these goats, but they're relatively level from hooks to pins. So all that counts into balance, and you don't have to touch one to see that. But I do always like to see these goats with a showman setting them up and just kind of get off and study them. So, you know, if we get Jacob a hold of one of these goats just to kind of set him up, you know, I like to get off and just kind of study from the side profile and just see how his lines come together. He doesn't want to show a whole lot today, but how his lines come together. Is he strong enough and level enough down his top? Is he smooth enough right in this shoulder? Does this head and neck, and this is really important. You hear them talk about goats that where their neck tied too low or they don't tie smooth. Does that neck come right out of the top of that shoulder, just straight up, and then that head set's really attractive, and a goat that has that kind of look is one that's really balanced. And that's what I like to see. That little extra bit of color that this goat has, that's always a plus in my mind. I'll never buy one just because of that. But if I've got two that I'm studying that are very, very close in terms of quality and I'm having a hard time, that little bit of color doesn't hurt anything from a selection standpoint. It's one of those things that will catch a judge's eye when he walks in the ring. It's one of those things that will kind of stick with the judge as he works through, particularly a big class. He'll remember the cape-fronted goat or the goat that had the red hip or whatever that might be. So a little bit of color is not a bad thing at all when we start talking about the overall balance and eye appeal and correctness, because that ring appeal, that does weigh into that to some extent. So another question that I would ask our participants today, Dottie, is, you know, in terms of if you have to make a decision between a goat that has a structural issue or a goat that doesn't have enough muscle, which one do you go with? What's your choice? If you have one that's got a little bit of a structural issue, or you got one that just doesn't have enough muscle, which one of those would you lean towards? And I'd like to hear what some of our participants might think of that. So type that into the chat box as we continue to talk a little bit about selection.
Yeah, so, Dr. Ripley, we'll get those answers coming in. I want to give a shout out because our folks did participate in your first question. We had lots of folks say cannonbone. I know we've already gone past that, but they did do a great job. They're very interactive, and we have some really great questions coming in that we'll get to for sure. We have lots of folks watching with us from all across Texas. We have Snyder, Hill County, Roby, Texas. We even have folks from Arizona and Kentucky. So, you know, just lots of folks interacting with us and engaging. all of those folks I want to encourage to share this post and keep commenting and liking so that all your friends can see it too. You're sharing some really great information that I know is going to be helpful. But the more we share it, the more people get to watch with us. We know that folks are back working and we're grateful for some normalcy, but these folks will want to watch after work with us. So if we share it and get it on their timeline, they'll be able to catch up with us. Dr. Ripley, if it's all right for you, we're going to go ahead and ask a question real quick. You talked about muscle indicators as well as growth indicators, but talking about muscle, and even as a segue into the question we just posed to the group, someone's wondering if top shape is all genetics or if there's a way or products that we can use to help fill in that top shape.
Well, yeah, that's a great question. And what I would say is that it's mostly genetic. If you take one that doesn't have the right kind of skeletal shape, in other words, the upper part of that skeleton has a little bit of an A-frame instead of being round, you can't get enough top shape in goats that are built that way. So you have to have the right kind of skeletal shape in order to have some top shape. However, you can have one with a great skeleton, and if you don't do a good job feeding him and he doesn't get enough protein and enough energy in his ration, he's not going to have enough top shape either. So it's a combination of both genetics and nutrition. But I would lean towards genetics first. Excuse me. You have to have one that's built correctly, that has the right kind of skeleton, and then do a good job feeding them. So it is a combination of both, but genetics are number one in terms of muscle shape. Everybody's looking for that silver bullet product. I don't believe it exists. I think if you've got a good goat and you do a good job feeding him and providing the nutritional requirements that he needs, whatever that's through, a good balanced feed, a supplement of some sort, if he's getting the nutrition that he needs and the genetics are there, that goat is going to have enough muscle shape in the end. So that's how I would answer that one, Dottie.
Excellent. Thanks, Dr. Ripley. As we wait for more folks to chime in on your question, to repeat it, the question to everybody watching with us was, if you had a choice between two, one that's a little better structurally, one that is lacking a little muscle, which one do you go with? So we'll wait for folks to chime in on that question. While we do, we had another question come in, and it's regarding rib shape. The folks are interested, how can you add more rib shape?
How can you add more rib shape?
Can you? If so, how?
Okay, so as I talked about, the shape of that rib is primarily determined at birth. It's primarily determined at conception. That is a genetic trait. You either have goats that are flat ribbed or you have goats that have the right kind of shape and turn to their rib. You can add some volume with fill. So, if you're feeding more roughage and more filler into these goats, you're going to get more volume in their body. But if he's flat in the upper part of his rib, all you're going to do is add more belly down low. You're not going to change the shape of that rib. So, in essence, increasing rib shape is a myth. Rib shape is determined when that goat is, when that doe and that buck get together. That determines what that rib shape is going to look like in this kid. You can add just a little bit of volume with how you feed them and keeping them full, but you're not going to change the true shape of that rib with anything other than genetics.
Thanks, Dr. Ripley. Going back to your original question, I think the consensus for the group is let's go with the one that's better structurally. How did we do?
Okay, well, that would be my choice. Well, that would be my second choice. My first choice is let's go find another goat. So there are plenty of good ones out there that have good structure and enough muscle. That's what I was looking for, actually. But there are, I agree, my first priority is always going to be on structure. If you've got the right structure, including the right base width and the right rib shape, the indicators of muscle are probably that one is going to come on and get enough muscle. So if I'm going to take a chance on one, it's going to be the good structured one that you questioned today, whether he might have enough muscle. The really, really stout, really wide, really expressive one that's terrible on his feet and legs is in the end going to be a really expressive one that's terrible on his feet and legs. And that typically is not going to get you very far with most judges. So I shy away from those completely. Those that, are really bad on their back legs, that come together too much, or they're really, really bumped over on their front end, and they're having a hard time getting around. I'm going to shy away from those in general, and I'm going to go find the structurally correct one that I think is going to feed into enough muscle. So they got it right. That would be, the first choice is find one that's got it all. The second choice is find that one that's structurally correct. That's exactly right. One thing that I failed to mention, Jacob, get this little goat here. Yeah, the little one laying down. That I failed to mention in terms of indicators of growth. They said cannon bone. I completely agree with that. I talked a little about length of extension up through the front end. And you can see this goat is one that's, he's smooth enough, certainly, but he's not just giraffe neck. So he's not going to grow a tremendous amount. But look at the length of his head, and as you're studying these goats, look at the length from their poll to the end of their nose and compare that from goat to goat. And those goats that are longer cannon bone, that are typically longer bodied, are also going to be longer in their face. From the point of their poll to the end of their nose, they're going to be longer there. And that's another indicator of one that has some potential and some future ahead of it. Now, again, this goat here is a little bit shorter. He's a little bit shorter here. He certainly is shorter here, but he's got a whole lot more shape here than the other goat in this pen. Just tremendous in terms of his shape and his muscularity, his expression. That's a function of him being just a little bit earlier maturing. Those earlier maturing ones are going to show you that expression and show you that muscle shape earlier in their life. And that's what this one does. That doesn't mean that his end weight is going to be that much thicker than the bigger, later maturing goat, but he's going to be one that's sure going to be fun early on. It's going to be fun to jackpot, and then later on, you're going to have to manage him to keep him fresh so that he'll be for you all the way to his end point. Certainly, he's one that you can do that.
Excellent. Thanks, Dr. Ripley. We're getting a little bit of wind noise, so I just want to apologize to the crew with us on Facebook. We are out in the field. We're grateful to be with the Jacksons at Lacopa Ranch, and we're grateful for the opportunity to be there and see their great goats. So bear with us. The information we're getting today is second to none from somebody who really is in the know with this. Dr. Ripley works with us in Extension, but he's also a dad. He's a goat breeder. He's a superintendent and a major goat show judge. So I'm happy to be hearing from him today. So bear with us. Dr. Ripley, we really have some great questions coming in. So now that we're kind of out of the wind a little bit, can you talk a little bit about how important it is to have wider chested goats?
Absolutely. So, as we talked about in the beginning, that base width, and that's where I stand off and I watch these goats walk around. I want to see them wide going away from me, but I also want to see width up through their chest floor. That's at the base. When you hear judges talk about base width, that's exactly it. It's that width between their back legs walking away, between their front legs coming to you. So you certainly want to see width there. The key there, though, is to find one that's got some base width, but then when you study the way his shoulder lays in, that he's angular and he's smooth. When his shoulder lays into his neck and as it ties into his rib, that he's smooth there and attractive. The other key to that is studying up through their front end, their chest floor. You want that to be extremely smooth in his breastplate. So you don't want to see a whole lot of front end sticking out as he comes to you. He can be tremendously wide, but can be a little bit coarser fronted. Those are the kind that, especially if they're young like this, if they begin to show those traits, those are probably goats that aren't going to be as attractive and as balanced in the end. So you want base width, but you want that width to tie in really smooth and be attractive up through the front end.
Excellent. Great description there. Going to the other end of the goat, we have a question come in asking how important tail set placement is.
Okay. So, we talked a little bit about not wanting them to be dead level. And I still, when I stand off and study goats, I want them to balance and to be attractive. So a goat whose tail is set just a little higher on his back. Let's get them moving around just a little bit. They're just going to look more level. This goat's tail is set really high. And, this is one of those bigger frame, later maturing goats. but what he has, here's his hook bones and here's his pin bones. If you stand over him, his hooks are this wide, his pins are this wide. So that gives you that shape that we want to see in his hip. And then you get off to the side and you study, and that tail is set up where it needs to be. So he's got enough set to his hip that he's functional. If they get too level, that's a lot of times those goats that get really choppy and that have a hard time getting off their back legs. He's got just enough set to his hip to be functional as he moves around, but he's level enough to really balance and give a good look when you set him on the move. So you got to have a balance between the two. You sure don't want that tail to be set real low and have that kind of round, steep hip appearing goat that we don't see as many of them today as we used to, but more and more of these goats have gotten better in terms of tail set and in terms of hip structure, and I think that's really important. I pay far more attention to the hooks and pins and how those are constructed in terms of width and in terms of levelness than I do where the tail set, but that tail set just adds to the look, and I still think it's important.
Excellent. Thanks, Dr. Ripley. As we begin to, kind of wrap up, I know you'll have some more thoughts as we go along, but I want to encourage the crew on Facebook one more time to get your questions in. If you just get those in the comments, we'll certainly address them. You have the right guy on the line today who's talking about market goats, which is something that we've been waiting to hear about. Dr. Ripley, real quick, I want to remind everybody that on top of these live videos we've been doing, which have been an excellent opportunity to talk to experts just like you about various species, we also have a wide range of resources online at our website. That website is texasyouthlivestock.com. There you're going to find a whole bunch of print resources. You're going to find video resources just like this, as well as previous recordings of these types of videos. Most importantly, related to this, you're going to find Explore project guides. And Dr. Ripley, in our Market Lamb and Goat project guide, we talk a whole section about selection. We even have some activities and speed judging exercises. So just want to remind you that while our time together here on Facebook is invaluable when we hear live from folks like you, we always have our website online at texasyouthlivestock.com ready to give you the resources you need. So moving on to another question we had from someone on Facebook. They're wondering when to go ahead and buy that good one or risk waiting to buy a lower birth weight goat.
So, yeah, there's goat sales in Texas, and I know we got people on here from other states, but for us, we typically, most of our goats are bred to show between January and March. That's when the majority of our shows are in Texas, between county shows in the winter through the spring majors is the majority of our shows. Obviously, we have some fall fairs and we have the State Fair of Texas, so those goats are coming out of a different age. But typically, we're talking about those goats that are going to show at somewhere between January and March. We're looking for goats that are born so that they'll be somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 months to a year old at showtime. So the majority of these goats are selling right about now that we're looking at for major shows. So, anytime from the middle ladder to the end of May, all the way through about mid-July is where the majority of those goats are going to sell. Now, that doesn't mean that there's not still going to be goats available that are June born, that are really good, that aren't going to be available till August or so. And, I know that there's different reasons why we might have to wait if we're feeding at a school ag farm and we don't have access to that facility until school starts, or, it's just not, something that we can do during the summer that you might.
Oh, Dr. Ripley, it looks like your video went out and we're having a hard time hearing you. But I know you're going to join us real quickly. For everybody watching, to remind you that we're out on location. We are at the Lacopa Ranch, where we're thankful to have great goats. But our service is a little spotty, and as you can hear, the wind is touch and go. So real quickly, I want to remind you to share this video. It's about goat selection, which is something that everyone's been interested in. So we will try to have more goat videos in the future, hopefully with a little less wind, but still all the great information and experts on the line with us. So while we're at it, if you'll go ahead and like our page, which is Texas Youth Livestock and Agriculture, that's the one that you're on right now. If you like that, you'll get notifications in the future of other live videos we're doing, as well as other resources that we're putting out. So just want to remind you to do that. Here's also where we'll post updates about major livestock shows and other updates you might have. Looks like we may have got disconnected from Dr. Ripley, so we'll try to let him join back. If not, we just want to thank you for joining us. Today, I see a lot of questions coming in about feed and nutrition. And so I want to remind you that we did a whole series over market lambs. And while they're not the same species, there are certainly some similarities and overlap between the two. But we are going to try to keep the goat conversation going. So keep those questions coming. If we have enough interest, certainly we will start talking about feed and nutrition for our goat projects. In the meantime, our folks are going to try to reconnect. So while they do, I want to remind you again about the resources we have at texasyouthlivestock.com. Here, I know you're interested in market goats today, but we cover all species on our Texas Youth Livestock and Ag website. So we have everything from market lambs, market steers, heifers, even rabbits and poultry. So certainly keep up with our website, and the way you can do that best is here on Facebook. So just to kind of recap some other projects we've been doing, we've been hearing from Dr. Sean Ramsey, who is a professor here at Texas A&M University, and he's walked us all the way through market lambs. So we've talked about selection, feed nutrition, maintenance, health, showmanship, the whole works. So certainly check those out, as well as Dr. Jason Clear, who's walked us completely through the market steer and breeding heifer species as well. So those are excellent opportunities. Just wanted to remind you of that. Certainly keep your good questions coming. Looks like we're trying to get reconnected, so I hope we do. So stick with us if you can. If not, always check right back here on Facebook and share these videos. Dr. Ripley, we can hear you. I don't know if we're completely connected yet, but we have some great questions coming in. Hopefully we'll be able to connect. And if not, I've been telling the folks, certainly we'll try to do some more market goat videos in the future. So Dr.
Absolutely.
Ripley, are you there?
Yes. Can you hear me, Dottie?
We can hear you, but we can't see you.
Well,
hang on one second.
You don't need to see me. That's the bad part of me anyway. So.
We'll see, but we're trying to get connected. Dr. Ripley, we've had some really great questions coming in, and you might have earned yourself an ongoing gig here, because folks are really interested in market goats and in everything you're saying, and certainly for good reason. We're learning a lot here. Dr. Ripley, I'd like to talk just a second about some other resources we have that we haven't mentioned that often, but are actually pretty important to me and you, and that's our Let's Get Started resources. Those are online at texasyouthlivestock.com, and these resources are intended for inexperienced or new showmen, and the goal with these resources are to help them understand what they need to quite literally get started in the market goat or any species project. And so one really big tool with those resources is we explain to them the average cost of everything. And Dr. Ripley, me and you have worked for a number of years now on livestock project economics, what it takes to feed these animals, what it takes to get them to the veterinarian, the facilities, other associated costs with raising these projects. And our Let's Get Started resources are really a great tool to help communicate that to new exhibitor families. And so, as you'll remember, Dr. Ripley, through some of our research, we've learned that the average purchase price, of course, these numbers are from a couple years ago, and we're working right now in real time to update those. But our current numbers from a couple years ago show that our average purchase price for goats are at around $800. And then when we talk about the full goat project in general, we're looking at a total cost of about $1,500 for that full project experience. So just wanted to remind folks of that research we have going on. Thanks for everybody's input who did respond to that. And just remind you of those resources that may be a helpful tool as you get started in terms of starting your market goat project. So Dr. Ripley, we can see you now. If we can get you unmuted, we should be good to go.
Sorry about the technical difficulties. That's a really good point that you bring up about, part of the selection process as a family is we had to sit down and decide how much do we want to spend and what can we afford to do. And we set a budget about what we were going to spend buying projects because we knew what it cost to feed them and how much we were going to invest in them year long. And so that's a decision that we had to make. And as all you families that are watching are well aware, that is all over the board. There's goats out there that are just a few $100s, and there are goats out. It really depends on what you want to do as a family and what you feel comfortable with. But the thing that I always caution families is set your budget and stick to it. Don't get somewhere and get carried away and then have that buyer's regret a little later and wish that you hadn't spent as much as you did. So set the budget, stick with it. That's not what it's all about. What it's about is the opportunity that you're going to have to spend time together as a family, to learn about this project, to put kids in places where they're going to be around other kids that are really good. The best kids in the world are taking part in this project. And that's what this is all about. It's not about buying the best one and going and always doing the best. It's certainly we want to be competitive, and certainly we want to have a positive experience, but there's so much more to it. So that's a great topic that you bring up, Dottie, thinking about cost.
Dr. Ripley, as we go ahead and start to wrap up, you got away from us a little bit, but just wanted to bring you up to speed. We have a lot of great questions coming in about feed and supplements and some other things, topics that, maybe we could go over in coming weeks, and we might have be on to something here with the market goats. Folks are really interested in it. And so certainly we can come back to some of those feed and other topics. To end us on one last question and then your parting thoughts.
Sure.
We had somebody ask a question. Do you think it's easier to maintain an earlier maturing goat maintain a later maturing goat or push an earlier maturing goat? I think I swapped that. I was trying to read it in real time.
Yeah, it would be the opposite. Really, there's probably more skill required to maintain one of those early maturing goats, because when they mature, that's when theoretically they've reached their end point, and that's when they should be at their absolute peak. And if that happens in December and you don't want to show them till March or February, then your skill as a feeder and a manager comes in to play there, and being able to maintain that earlier maturity and keep him looking fresh and looking the way we want him to look at San Antonio in February, when he looked his absolute best at Christmas. That's hard to do, and it does take some skill, and it takes some experience to be able to do that. One of the later maturing goats that you can just kind of push and almost have those goats eating free choice from the time you get them till the time you show them. Those goats are easier to manage a lot of times. They don't require, the exercise program. They don't require that you make as many changes and tweaks to the nutrition program as you go through that, the phases of his development in life as one of those earlier maturing ones does. So without question, it's easier to feed one that's genetically set to peak at the right time. So if you're going to show that goat in February, ideally they should hit their genetic high point at 9 to 10 months. Could be 11, but somewhere in that ballpark. So back up from February, 9 or 10 months, and start looking at goats that are, that April, maybe even in early May, if that's the kind that you want to do, until you feel comfortable with your feeding program. That's probably going to be your best bet. You can kind of push and just feed those goats straight through and not have to manage them as closely. Now, there are huge advantages to having these goats that have a little more maturity. Once you get comfortable with your feeding program, you can get more shape. You can kind of shape those goats and get more expression in terms of their muscle when they have that little additional maturity. So there's benefits to being able to feed that goat past his maturity point just a little further once you get comfortable with it. So it's one of those things that just takes some time, Dottie, to figure out exactly what's going to work for you and your program as a family.
Excellent. Thanks, Dr. Ripley. That about wraps it up for the questions we have on Facebook. I'd certainly pitch it back to you to give your last parting thoughts on goat selection, but want to tease the group that hopefully we'll be able to cover more market goat topics. Folks have a lot of questions about feed and showmanship and other things, so certainly we'd love to get to those. But Dr. Ripley, we've loved having you. Your expertise in this area is certainly noted, and we're grateful to have you on with us today. So thanks for being here. Want to remind everybody to like our Facebook page, Texas Youth Livestock and Ag, because then you'll always see when we're going live and who we have with us and what we're talking about.
Great. Well, I appreciate it, Dottie. Again, I apologize for the technical issues when you're on a ranch a little ways out of town. You never know exactly how things are going to work, but I'm glad we were able to get most of it through today and get through the majority of the points that we wanted to make. You know, selection is that's the first step in success. If you start with a good one, the other things will fall into place for you as a family and as a feeder a whole lot better. It's a whole lot more fun to feed a good one than it is one that has issues that we're trying to correct. So if you're paying attention to structure, to muscle, to balance, if you can put those three things together in selection of a market goat project, and then we can talk about feeding and some of those other things in future sessions, it'll all come together and you'll have success in this project. Again, I'll say just what I said a while ago. There's nothing better for me for our family. This is something that we thoroughly enjoyed doing. This was our pastime. This was our sport. This was our extracurricular activity that we did. Our kids did other things, but this was the focus. And I think our kids benefited from it. I think they're kids that learned how to interact with adults. They learned how to interact with other kids. They had friends from all over the state. When our kids went to college, they had friends at A&M or wherever they went, University of North Texas, that they knew, that they showed with at the major stock shows. So the best project in the world, the best way to spend time is right here with Junior Livestock Project. So I'd encourage you to continue to work and to get better at it and to enjoy your time with your family in this project.